Snow fell from the gray sky like tiny frozen feathers. The ground was covered in thick white ice. Cold wind blew across the refugee camp on the alien planet. Tents shook. Fires burned low. People stayed inside, trying to survive. But outside, a woman sat in the snow. Her skin was blue. Her hair was long, silver white, tangled, and dirty. She wore old clothes, too thin for the cold. Her arms were wrapped around two small children, both shivering, both barefoot. Their lips were blue. Their eyes looked tired and scared. She was not just any woman. She was a widow. Her mate had died in the last war. Her home had burned. Her people had scattered. Now she was alone, with her children, and no one wanted to help her. She stood up slowly and walked to a food trader's tent. "Please," she whispered. "A little food, just for my children." The trader didn't even look at her. "Go away. No credits, no food." She lowered her head and walked back. Her children hugged each other for warmth. Another man passed. She tried again. "Please, sir. Shelter. Just one night." He laughed. "You and your half-dead brats. Get lost." No one cared. No one helped. To them, she was just another alien widow, useless, unwanted, forgotten. Then a sound came. An engine. A small cargo vehicle stopped near her. It was old and rusty. A tall human man stepped out. He wore a thick coat, gloves, and boots. His face had a scar down one side. His eyes were tired, like he had seen too much. He looked at her. She looked up. Their eyes met. The human looked away and walked past her. He didn't say a word. She watched him go, her heart sinking again. Later that night, she and her children huddled near a burned-out fire. Snow fell on their heads. Her legs were numb. Her youngest child coughed softly. She kissed his forehead. She, little one, just a little longer. Footsteps. She turned. It was the same human. He held something in his hands, a small food pack. He dropped it beside her. "Don't get used to it," he said coldly. "I don't do charity." She looked at the pack, then at him. Her voice cracked. "Why?" He paused. "I saw your kids, that's all." He turned to leave, but before he could, she reached out with trembling hands and spoke the words that changed everything. "Please take them, human. I can't survive alone anymore." He stopped. The snow kept falling. He didn't turn around. He stood there in silence. Her children looked at him with wide eyes. She lowered her head. "If you leave us here, we'll die. But they don't deserve that. You're strong, you're warm, you're human." Still, he said nothing. She whispered. Again, softer this time. "Please, just them. I've already given up, but they still have a future." The man finally turned around. He looked at the three of them, this broken woman and her two weak, quiet children. Something in his chest felt tight. He had buried feelings like that long ago. Long before this war. Long before this galaxy went cold. He hated that she made him feel anything. "I'm not a father," he said. "I don't ask for that," she replied. "Just keep them safe." He didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to his vehicle. She closed her eyes. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was over. But the sound of the engine came again. The vehicle stopped beside her. The back door opened. "Get in," human said. She looked up in shock. He didn't repeat it. He just waited. She stood up, holding her children close. Slowly, they stepped into the warm space inside as the door closed behind them. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. The human sat in the front, silent, cold. But he drove. He didn't ask her name. She didn't give it. But in her heart, she knew she had found a tiny piece of hope in the snow. And maybe, just maybe. This human would not leave them behind. The engine hummed softly as the cargo vehicle moved across the snowy plains. Inside the back compartment, it was warm, but quiet. The alien widow held her children close, her eyes watching every breath they took. She didn't say a word, not yet. She was still unsure if this human would change his mind. In the front seat, the human man gripped the controls tightly. His name was Keller. He was a cargo runner, ex-soldier, and someone who preferred silence. He had seen too much. He had lost too much. Feelings were dangerous. Attachments, even worse, and now. There were 3 aliens in the back of his transport. He cursed himself under his breath. What the hell am I doing? When they reached an abandoned refuel station, he stopped the vehicle. "You've got 5 minutes," he said, not looking back. The widow stepped out slowly with her children. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind still bit at their skin. She guided her children toward a rusted bench inside the station's broken wall. They sat, huddled, while Keller checked his gear. He didn't plan to keep them. That wasn't the plan. But something about the way the children clung to her, the way she never begged for herself, only for them, gnawed at his chest. He opened a ration pack and walked over. Without a word, he placed it in her hands. She looked up, surprised. "Thank you." He nodded once and turned away. The oldest child, a boy with large eyes and sharp cheekbones, whispered, "Are you going to leave us here?" Keller stopped mid-step. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to the vehicle and stared at the snowy road ahead. He didn't know why it hurt. Later, inside the shelter of his cargo hold, he finally asked, "What's your name?" The woman looked at him from the far corner, where she and the children sat on folded blankets. "Tayala," she said softly. "And there, Ziki and Rem." He nodded, though the names were strange to him. "You've got no family?" he asked. Tayala shook. Her head, all gone. War, disease, camps. He could tell she wasn't lying. Her eyes had that look, the same look he had seen in soldiers who had lost everything. He sighed and tossed her a new thermal blanket. "I'm not a savior," he muttered. "You're more than that," she said. "You stopped. That's already more than most." He said nothing. That night, a storm hit. Snow slammed against the cargo walls. Winds howled. The heater struggled to keep up. Rem, the youngest child, began coughing again. The little girl's chest heaved as her body shivered. Keller watched from the other side of the cargo room, his eyes narrowing. He stood, walked to the front, and dug through a box. When he came back, he had a small bottle in hand. "Give her this," he said, handing it to Tayala. "It's human-made, might help." She took it with shaking fingers. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't answer right away. Then finally, "Because I remember what it's like to be helpless." As the storm raged on, Tayala gently fed the medicine to Rem. The little girl's breathing eased after a while. Keller sat across from them, watching in silence. "You're not what I expected," Tayala whispered. Keller raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" She smiled faintly. "Humans are said to be cold, dangerous, always putting themselves first," he scoffed. "Most of us are. Then why are you different?" He looked away. "Maybe I'm just too tired to be cruel." By morning, the storm had passed, but something else had changed. Ziki, the boy, quietly placed a carved piece of scrap metal next to Keller. It was shaped like a bird. "What's this?" Keller asked. "It's a gift," Ziki said. "Mom said we should give thanks." Keller stared at the little object. It was ugly, crooked, bent in the wrong places, but he didn't throw it away. He placed it carefully on his dashboard. He didn't say it out loud. But something had shifted inside him. This wasn't part of his job This wasn't part of his plan. But somewhere between her words and the children's eyes, he had started to care. And that scared him more than any war he'd ever fought. The human shelter wasn't a house. 'Twas a converted cargo container hidden deep in the rocky canyons of a cold desert world. On the outside, it looked like junk. But inside, it was warm, safe, and stocked with supplies. He had built it for himself, never thinking he'd share it with anyone, especially not an alien family. As the door opened with a hiss, Tyala's eyes widened. Ziki and Rem peeked inside, holding her cloak tightly. The air was warmer here. There were lights, a small stove, blankets, water tanks, even books. It's not much, the human muttered. But it's better than the snow. Tyala looked at him. Why are you still helping us? Keller didn't answer. He walked in, dropped his gear on a chair, and opened a food box. Ziki stared at the small wall full of old photos and strange human tools. Rem pointed at a glowing orb on the wall and whispered, "Is that a star?" "No," Keller said. "Just a lamp." But Tyala saw it. That strange mix in his face, tough but tired. Cold, but not cruel. He was a man who had built this place. For no one but himself, yet somehow, it now felt like home. She began cleaning the floor with a cloth, carefully wiping dust. Not because he asked her, but because it was the only way she knew to show respect. That night, as they sat around a heat lamp, the silence was broken by Rem's tiny voice. "Do humans have mothers too?" Keller nodded. "We do." "Did yours hold you when you were scared?" she asked, looking at him with big eyes. He paused. "No," he said after a moment. "Not really." Tyala's eyes softened. The next day, Keller went out to get fuel from a nearby outpost. Tyala stayed behind with the children. But something was wrong. The sensors on the door beeped once, a soft, strange sound. Tyala froze. She went to the window and peeked out. A figure moved in the distance, not human, not friendly. A bounty hunter. She knew that armor. Her people had a price on their heads, widows and children sold to the mines. Or worse, she grabbed the children and pulled them into the small, hidden room behind the stove. Was tight, dark, and smelled of old tools. But it was safe. She didn't have a weapon, only a kitchen blade. But she stood in front of the door, ready. The metal hatch creaked open. Heavy footsteps echoed inside. Tyala held her breath, but before the figure could step farther in, boom, a shot rang out. Sparks flew, then silence. Tyala rushed out. Keller stood in the doorway, smoke rising from the barrel of his gun. "You all right?" he asked, breathing hard. She nodded, her voice stuck in her throat. "Who was that?" "He asked a hunter," she said. "From the markets." He looked at the body. "They tracked you." She lowered her head. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring danger to your home. This place stopped being just mine the moment I opened that door for you," he muttered, pulling the door shut. Later that night, after burying the body in the snow, Keller sat alone on the roof. Tyala climbed up quietly and sat beside him. "I understand if you want us to leave," she said softly. He didn't look at her. "Where would you go?" She had no answer. He finally sighed. "I didn't bring you here just to throw you back out." She stared at him. "Then why?" He didn't answer right away. He just said, "You remind me of something I lost a long time ago." The stars above them burned cold and bright below. The children slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Tyala whispered, "You saved us." Twice now. Keller looked at her, tired but calm. "I didn't plan to." She smiled gently. "Sometimes the best plans are the ones we don't make." And in that quiet moment, sitting under alien stars, in a shelter built for one to strangers, became something more. Not lovers, not family, but something new. A bond made not of blood, but of survival pain and unexpected kindness. The days passed quietly in the canyon shelter. Keller went out each morning to find supplies, trade spare parts, or fix broken droids in the nearby settlements. Tyala stayed behind with the children. She cooked, cleaned, taught them alien songs, and sometimes sat in silence staring at the desert sky. There were no more bounty hunters. No visitors. Just peace. But under that peace, something unspoken began to grow. One evening, while Keller repaired a power cell, Tyala stood watching him. Her hands were folded, her eyes steady. The children were asleep in the back room. "You never asked what I was before," she said softly. He didn't look up. Didn't think it mattered. She walked closer. "To you, maybe not. But to my people, it means everything." He put the tool down. "Go on." She sat across from him. The small fire between them glowed blue. "In my culture," she began, "a widow has no place unless she is claimed." Claimed. Keller frowned. Tyala nodded. "A widow's value is tied to her bondmate. Once he dies, she becomes less than nothing. The children are seen as weak bloodlines. They're often taken and sold." Keller's jaw tightened. "That's barbaric. It's tradition," she said, with sadness. "But there's one way to stop it. If someone claims the widow again, especially an outsider, her status resets. The children are protected." Keller leaned back, silent. Then he said, "So that's why you asked me to take the kids." She didn't deny it. "Yes. I knew I wouldn't survive long, I thought. Maybe if a strong male, even a human, took them in, they'd live." "And now?" he asked. She looked into his eyes. "Now I see that you're not just strong, you're kind." He looked away. "I'm not some hero, Tyala." She smiled gently. "You don't have to be." Later that night, she left something at his bedside. It was a small necklace woven from threads of her old cloak and decorated with 3 smooth stones. He picked it up in the morning and stared at it. It wasn't beautiful, but it felt important. Tyala saw him holding it and said quietly, "That's called a heart-bind thread. In my world, it's how one mate thanks another for saving their soul." Keller froze. She turned away. "Don't worry, it doesn't mean we're bonded. It just means I'm grateful." He didn't know what to say. The necklace felt heavy in his hand. That day, they traveled together to an abandoned wreck site. Keller needed a stabilizer. Tyala insisted on helping as they walked through twisted metal and burnt cargo. A low hoarse sound. Keller raised his weapon behind a broken hull. They found an old man half buried in wires, coughing blood. He was a scavenger, left behind by his crew. "Help me." He begged. Keller checked his wounds. Too deep, too late. The old man grabbed Tyala's wrist. "Ah, you're one of them. The Widow clan, they'll be hunting you again." "They know who?" Keller asked sharply. "The Barrack Syndicate." "They learned she's with a human. They'll come." Then the man died. Keller stood up slowly. Tyala's face was pale. "They'll never stop. Not until I'm taken back, or dead." Keller looked at her, voice low. "Then I guess we better prepare." Back at the shelter, he worked in silence, reinforcing walls, checking weapons, hiding emergency supplies. Tyala helped without asking questions. But when he paused, she touched his arm. "You don't have to fight my battles." He looked at her, hard. "I didn't plan to care, Tyala. But I do now," she whispered. "Then let me say this clearly, even if we never speak it again." He waited. "You may not be my mate by law," she said, "but in my heart, you are. Already more than that." And in that moment, under flickering lights and cracked metal ceilings, a bond was sealed, not with words, not with ceremony, but with quiet truth. They never spoke of it again. But from that night forward, they stood as one. The stars above the desert glowed dim, almost cold. Keller stood outside the shelter with a pair of night vision lenses over his eyes. He scanned the canyon ridge, unmoving. The wind carried the dry scent of dust and tension. Inside, Tyala and the children were asleep, but Keller hadn't slept in 2 nights. Something was coming. Ever since the dying scavenger warned them, Keller knew they were being hunted again. This time, it wasn't just a random bounty hunter. This was organized, silent, patient. The Barak Syndicate, a brutal alien network that traded in flesh, fear, and power. They had eyes in every outpost. They would come for Tyala. They would come for her children, and now they would come for him, too. At sunrise, Keller walked into town, wearing a worn cloak and carrying scrap metal for trade. The market was busy. Aliens of all kinds bartered and shouted. But something felt off. A group of soldiers stood near the gate, tall, armored, and silent. Their armor was dark red, marked with the Barak sigil. Keller turned and walked past a trader he knew. "Trouble?" he asked quietly. The trader's eyes flicked toward the soldiers. "They're asking about a human with a blue-skinned woman and 2 alien kids." Keller didn't blink. "And you told them?" "I said I didn't know anything," the trader whispered. "But others might. You need to disappear." Keller returned to the shelter at full speed, sand spraying behind his vehicle. When he arrived, Tyala was outside, hanging clothes under the morning sun. Her smile faded when she saw his face. "They're here, aren't they?" she asked. He nodded. "They know everything. Faces. Children, me." She bit her lip. "Then we run again." Keller shook his head. "We've run enough. They won't stop." "You said it yourself." She looked down. "I didn't want you to get dragged into this. I'm already in it," he said. "And I'm not leaving you." That night, as the children slept, Tyala sat beside Keller near the heater. She handed him a piece of folded cloth. "What's this?" he asked. "It's my only piece of our clan seal. If something happens to me, show it to any elder of my people. They'll protect the children." Keller stared at it. "You think I'll survive, and you won't." She looked away. "I've already lost everything once. If I lose them, I won't survive again." Keller stood and paced. He didn't want this. He didn't want this war. He didn't want these feelings. But he couldn't leave them. Not now. Not ever. The next day, they packed. Keller hid the children under the floor panels of the transport. He wired emergency oxygen and snacks, just in case. Tyala sat up front with him, hands tight on her lap. They took a hidden route through the cliffs toward a secret contact Keller had. An old war buddy who owed him more than a favor. But halfway through the canyon, the warning lights lit up. Tracker signal detected. Keller slammed the wheel. "We've been tagged." Tyala's eyes widened. "They're following us?" "Ah." He nodded. "Yes. And they're not far." Suddenly, the sky behind them turned red. A Barak assault ship appeared. Blaster fire rained down. Keller swerved hard. Rock shattered beside them. The vehicle shook. Sparks flew. "Get the children out," he shouted. "There's a cave nearby. Run." "But what about you?" Tyala cried. "I'll lead them away. I can't let them catch you." No, I won't leave you." He looked at her, eyes burning. "You asked me to take your children. You didn't ask me to die for them, but I'm doing it anyway." Tyala's hands shook. "You'll die." Keller reached into his coat and pulled out the heart-bind thread she had made. "I never wore this," he said, "because I didn't understand what it meant." Then, in front of her eyes, he tied it around his wrist. "But now I do." He jumped from the vehicle and ran toward the ship, firing his blaster into the sky. The transport veered into the rocks, flipped, and exploded behind him, throwing metal and dust everywhere. The Barok fighters turned after him, but in the chaos, Tyala carried the children into the cave, hidden by smoke and flames, as the sky burned. Her heart screamed for him, but she didn't cry. Not yet, because he gave them time, because he chose them over himself, because for the first time in her life, someone had loved her enough to stand and fight. The cave was cold and silent. Tyala held her breath, curled tightly around her children. Rem whimpered softly in her arms. Ziki tried to be brave, but his body trembled with every echo outside. Dots. Smoke from the explosion still floated in the air. The ground shook earlier, and now everything was still. Too still. Tyala's heart beat like a drum in her chest. Was Keller alive? She wanted to believe it. She needed to believe it. But part of her feared the truth, that he had died buying them time. Died so she and her children could escape. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Stay strong, little ones. Stay strong. For him." Hours passed. When the sun began to rise, a shadow moved at the mouth of the cave. Tyala pulled her children behind her and raised the small blade Keller had once given her. "Come no closer," she cried. The shadow limped forward, and then she saw the coat, burned, torn. The figure stumbled, knees weak. But it was him. Keller. Blood ran down his arm. His cheek was cut. One eye was swollen shut, but he was alive. He collapsed at the entrance, and Tyala rushed to him, dropping the blade. "Keller, you're alive." He coughed, then chuckled weakly. "I said I'd buy you time, not disappear." She helped him sit. Ziki ran to his side, tears in his eyes. "You came back. You came back." Rem hugged his leg. "I thought you went to the stars." Keller smiled. "Not yet, kid." They stayed in the cave for 2 days, hidden and healing. Tyala cleaned his wounds and wrapped his chest with fabric. The children stayed close, never letting him out of sight. On the second night, as the stars blinked overhead, Keller sat outside the cave entrance with Tyala. "I blew the tracker," he said quietly. "They'll think I died in the blast." She looked at him. "But you could have died. You almost did." He nodded. "Yeah, but if I hadn't, you'd be the ones buried under rock." She looked down. "I hated that you made that choice, and yet I'd do it again." There was silence for a while. Then she whispered, "You wore the heart bind." He looked at the band on his wrist. Burned and torn, but still there. "You gave it to me," he said. And I finally understood why. She turned to him, her voice trembled. "In our customs, when a male accepts the thread, he becomes more than protector." He raised an eyebrow. "What does he become?" She met his eyes, and for the first time, she said it aloud. "Mate." The word hung in the air like thunder. Keller didn't speak right away, but his face softened. "Guess that makes you more than a guest in my shelter." She smiled through wet eyes. "Guess that makes you more than a stranger in my life." In the quiet, they sat side by side. No kiss, no romance, just something stronger, a bond forged by survival, pain, and shared purpose. Inside the cave, the children were fast asleep. Outside, the stars watched over two souls who never planned to meet, but somehow became everything to each other. The next morning, Keller stood at the cave's edge, gazing across the rocky desert. "What now?" Tyala asked softly. He turned to her. "We stop hiding," he said. "We find a place where no one owns you. No one owns your children. A place where we start over." Her voice shook. "You mean?" "A new home." He nodded. "And this time, it won't just be my home, it'll be ours." And so, a human and an alien widow, once broken by war, hunted by syndicates, and lost in the cold stars, took their first steps together. Not as strangers, not as survivors, but as something more. A family. The stars had changed. They were warmer now, gentler, like they no longer looked down in silence but smiled from above. Keller's transport moved slowly across the green hills of a distant colony planet called Varan 3. It was far from the war zones, far from the Barrack Syndicate, and far from the cold planets where the story began. This world was new, untouched, peaceful, as the vehicle stopped on a grassy slope. Tayala stepped out and stared at the open fields. Her children followed close, their bare feet sinking into soft soil. For the first time in years, there was no snow, no smoke, no fear. "Is this it?" she whispered. Keller stepped beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "It's the furthest I could find." No patrols. No bounty records. No more running. Zeke ran ahead, laughing. Rem followed, chasing butterflies. Tayala laughed softly. The sound was unfamiliar, even to herself. Keller watched her, then pointed toward an old abandoned homestead near the edge of the hill. The roof was damaged, but the walls were strong. Solar panels still worked. Water lines could be repaired. "It's not much," he said. She turned to him. "It's everything." They began rebuilding that day. Keller taught Ziki how to carry tools. Tayala repaired the garden bed and cleared the old kitchen. Rem painted her name on the front wall using colorful stones she found near the stream. Every hour felt like healing. Every moment felt like home at night. They slept under one roof, not as strangers, not as passengers, but as something real. A family with no past to fear, and a future they could finally build together. One evening, a messenger drone flew overhead. It dropped a simple capsule with a screen. A newsflash. Tayala opened it carefully and read the message aloud. "The Barrack Syndicate has fallen." Keller raised an eyebrow. "Crushed by rival clans," she said with a smile. "Their records burned, their debts erased." Keller chuckled. "Good. I was tired of looking over my shoulder." She looked at him. "We're truly free now." He nodded. "Time to stop surviving. Time to start living," she added. Weeks later, they stood at the local registry center in the colony's capital. A gentle alien officer looked at them. "You wish to register as a household?" Keller nodded. The officer looked at Tayala. "What name shall we place on record?" Tayala turned to Keller. Her eyes were shining. "I never had a last name," she said softly. "Widows were stripped of them." Keller tilted his head. "What about mine?" She smiled. "What about ours?" He smiled back. Ziki and Rem stood between them, holding their hands. And just like that, the form was filled. Tayala Varin, Ziki Varin, Rem Varin, and Keller. There in that night, in their rebuilt home. Tayala placed a new heart-bind thread around his wrist. This time freshly woven with colors from Varen's flowers. "You gave us life again," she whispered. He took her hand. "You gave me something I never thought I'd have again," he said. "What's that?" she asked. He looked around at the glowing lights. The warm laughter of the children, the garden waiting to bloom, a reason to stay. He said, "And so far away from the frozen planets and forgotten battles, the alien widow who once begged for someone to adopt her children found a human who gave her everything she had lost, a safe home, a new name, and someone who stood beside her not out of pity, but because he chose her."